Okay, how do I turn that down? Do do do. Did that fix it? Why is it still yelling at me from a fucking bit rate? Hmm. Do, do, do. There we go. Jeez, that was crazy, causing me so many freaking problems. See if I can find an image of this actually. All right, I think I got it. Breaking working again. All right. Took 6 hours for the British to organize their infantry force and gather up to expect the men's parade. Howard was to lead the major assault, driving around the colonial left flank and taking them from the rear. So this was Hal's plan to go. Brigadier General Peugeot on the British left flank would lead a direct assault against the redoubt. Peugeot. Major John Pitcairn would lead the flank or the reserved force. Took several trips in longboats to transport Hell's initial force, considering about 1,500 men, to the eastern corner of the peninsula, known as Moulton's Point, by 2 p.m. Howe's chosen force has landed. However, while crossing the river, Howe noted a large number of colonial troops on top of Bunker Hill. He believed these to be reinforcements and immediately sent a message to Gage requesting additional troops. He then ordered some light infantry to take forward positions along the eastern side of the peninsula, alerting the colonists to his intended course of action. The troops sat down to eat while they waited for reinforcements. Colonials reinforced the position. Prescott saw the British preparation and called for reinforcements. And among the reinforcements were Joseph Warren, the popular young leader of the Massachusetts Committee of Safety, and Seth Pemroy, an aging Massachusetts militia leader. Both these men had commissions rank but had chosen to serve in the infantry. Prescott ordered the Connecticut men under Captain Knowlton to defend the left flank, where they used a crude dirt wall as a breastwork and topped it with fence rails and hay. They constructed 3 small V-shaped trenches in this dirt wall and breastwork. Troops that had arrived to reinforce this flank position included about 200 men from the 1st and 2nd. All right. About 200 men. The 1st and 3rd New Hampshire regiments under Colonel John Stark and James Reed. Stark's men did not arrive until Howe's forces landed his forces, and thus filled a gap from the fences that Howe could have taken advantage of had he pressed his attacks sooner. They took positions along the breastwork on the northern end of the colonial position. Low tide opened a gap along the Mystic River to the north, so they quickly extended the fence with a short stone wall to the water's edge. Colonel Stark proceeded to stake about 100 feet in front of the fence and ordered that no one fire into the British regulars past it. Further reinforcements arrived just before the battle, including portions of the Massachusetts Regiment and Colonel Brewer Nixon Rivers Little, and Major Moore as the Callender's Company's artillery. Confusion reigned behind the colonial lines. Many units sent toward the action stopped before crossing the Charleston Neck from Cambridge, which was under constant fire from gun batteries to the south. Others reached Bunker Hill and then were uncertain where to go from there and just milled around. One commentator wrote of the scene, "It appeared to me that there was never more confusion and less command. General Putnam was on the scene attempting to direct affairs, but unit commanders often misunderstood or even disobeyed orders." British assault. The British reinforcements had arrived. The 47th Maryland Foot and the 1st Marines. The British were ready to march. Brigadier Peugeot's forces were gathering just south of Charleston Village. All right, so Peugeot. I think I want to start this whole fucking thing over. Where did I put this fucking picture? And they were already taking casualties from sniper fire from the settlement. Howe asked Admiral Graves for assistance in clearing out the snipers. Graves had planned for such a possibility and ordered Carcass fired into the village and then send a landing party to set fire to the town. The smoke billowing from Charlestown lent an almost surreal backdrop to the fighting, as the winds were such that the smoke was kept from the field of battle. General Howe led the light infantry companies and grenadiers in assault on the American flank along the rail fence, which we just read. Damn it. Can this switch to blue when I click on blue, please? That would be really helpful. I need about 200 men here. So Howe comes in and attacks this flank. Expecting an easy effort against Stark's recently arrived troops, his light infantry were set along the narrow beach in column formation in order to turn the far left flank of the colonial positions. The grenadiers were deployed in the center, lining up 4 deep and several hundred across. Peugeot, commanding the 5th, 38th, 43rd, and 52nd, as well as Major Pitcairn's Marines, they were to feint an assault on the redoubt just before the British advance. The American position on the rail fence was reinforced by 2 pieces of artillery. So Peugeot was doing a fakery. On the redoubt. Howe had intended that the advance be preceded by an artillery and bombardment from the field pieces present, but it was soon discovered that these cannon had been supplied with the wrong caliber ammunition. Oh, wow. How embarrassing. Delaying the assault, attacking Breed's Hill presented an array of difficulties. The hay on the hillside had not been harvested, requiring that the regulars march through waist-high grass, which concealed the uneven terrain beneath. The pasture land of the hillside had been covered with crisscrossing rail fences, hampering the cohesion of marching formations. The regulars were loaded down with gear wholly unnecessary for the attack. The British troops were overheated in their wool uniforms under the heat of the afternoon sun, compounded by their nearly inferno from Charlestown. The colonists withheld their fire until the regulars were at least 50 paces from the position. As the regulars closed in range, they suffered from heavy casualties from colonial fire. The colonists benefited from the rail fence to steady their aim of their muskets, and enjoyed a modicum of cover from return fire. Undering this withering fire, the light companies melted away and retreated, some as far as their boats. So this first attack, utter failure. James Abercrombie, commanding the Grenadiers, was fatally wounded. Peugeot's attacks on the redoubt and breastworks fared little better. By stopping and exchanging fire with colonists, the regulars were fully exposed and suffered heavy losses. They continued to be harassed by snipers from Charlestown. Peugeot had ordered a retreat after seeing what happened to Howe's advance. So the first fail. The regulars reformed on the field and marched out again, this time navigating the field strewn with dead and wounded comrades. This time, Peugeot's was not a feint, but it was to assault the redoubt directly, possibly without the assistance of Howe's forces. Howe's advanced against Knowlton's positions on the rail fence instead of marching against Stark's position along the beach. All right, so their second attack coming against the rail fence. And then Peugeot comes out at the redoubt again at full force. The outcome of the second attack was very much the same as the first. One British observer wrote, "Most of our grenadiers and light infantry, the moment of presenting themselves, lost 3/4, and many 9/10 of their men. Some had only 8 or 9 men of a company left. Peugeot's attack did not enjoy any greater success than Howe's. He ordered retreat after almost 30 minutes of firing ineffective volleys at the colonial position. The second attack failed." Bam again, bam again, bam again. Meanwhile, confusion continued in the rear of the colonial forces. General Putnam tried with limited success to send additional troops from Bunker Hill to forward positions on Breed's Hill to support the embattled regiments. One colonial observer wrote to Samuel Adams afterward, "It appears to me that there was never more confusion and less command. Some companies and leaderless groups of men moved towards the field, others retreated. They were running low on powder and ammunition. The colonial regiment suffered from a hemorrhage of deserters. By the time the third attack, only 700 to 800 men left on Breed's Hill, with 150 in the redoubt." So there was... Oh, Jesus. 800 on the hill. 150 in the redoubt. Connecticut's captain John Chester saw an entire company in retreat and ordered his company to aim muskets at them to halt the retreat. They turned about and headed back to the battlefield. Oh, it's just a clusterfuck. The British rear was also in disarray. Wounded soldiers that were mobile had made their way to the landing areas and were being ferried back to Boston, while the wounded laying on the field of the battle were a source of moans and cries of pain. Howe sent word to Clinton in Boston for additional troops. Clinton had observed the first 2 attacks and sent around 400 men from the 2nd Marines and 63rd Foot and followed himself to help rally the troops. In addition to these reserves, he convinced about 200 walking wounded to form up for a third attack. Oh my gosh. The third assault was to concentrate squarely on the redoubt, with only a feint on the colonialist flank. Howe ordered his men to remove their heavy packs and leave all unnecessary equipment behind. He arrayed his forces into column formation rather than the extended order of the first 2 assaults, exposing fewer men along the front to colonial fire. The third attack was made at point of the bayonet and successfully carried out the redoubt. So the third attack came. This is the now first, second, third attack, all on the redoubt. And here they were finally successful. However, the final volleys of fire from the Colonists cost the life of Major Pitcairn. The defenders had run out of ammunition, reducing the battle to close combat. The advantage turned to the British, as their troops were equipped with bayonets on their muskets, while most of the Colonists were not. Colonel Prescott, one of the last men to leave the redoubt, parried bayonet thrusts with his normally ceremonial saber. It was during this retreat to the redoubt that Joseph Warren was killed. The retreat of much of the colonial forces from the peninsula was made possible part by the controlled withdrawal of forces along the rail fence, led by Stark and Knowlton, which prevented the encirclement of the hill. Burgoyne described their orderly retreat as no flight. It was even covered with bravery and military skill. It was so effective that most of the wounded were saved. Most of the prisoners taken by the British were mortally wounded. General Putnam attempted to reform the troops on Bunker Hill. However, the flight of the colonial forces was so rapid, the artillery piece and the entrenching tools had to be abandoned. The colonials suffered most of their casualties during the retreat. By 5 p.m., the colonists had retreated over the Charleston Neck and to fortified positions in Cambridge, and the British were in control of the peninsula. The aftermath. The British had taken ground at great loss. They suffered 1,000 casualties, 226 dead, 828 wounded, and a disproportionate amount of these were officers. The casualty count was highest suffered by the British in any single encounter during the entire war. General Clinton echoed Pyrrhus of Epirus, remarking in a diary, a few much such victories would have shortly put an end to the British dominion in America. British dead and wounded included 100 commissioned officers. 1/10 of them were officers. A significant portion of the British officer corps in America. Much of Howe's field staff was among the casualties. General Gage reported following officers' casualties in his report after the battle, listing lieutenants and above by name. 1 lieutenant colonel, 2 majors, 7 captains, 9 lieutenants, 15 sergeants, and 1 drummer. The drummer gets mentioned. That was the dead, not including wounded. Crazy. Colonial losses were about 450, of whom 140 were killed. Most of the colonial losses came during the withdrawal. Major Andrew McCarthy was technically the highest ranking colonial officers to die in battle, but he gave up his commission, so it technically was not. Okay. He was hit by cannon fire on the Charleston Neck, the last person to be killed in the battle. He was later commemorated by the dedication of Fort McClary in Kitterly, Maine. A serious loss to the Patriot cause, however, was the death of Joseph Warren. He was one of the Patriot guys in Boston doing all that stuff, all the crazy Boston stuff. He was the president of the Massachusetts Provisional Congress and had been appointed Major General June 14th. His commission had not been taken effect, and he was serving as a volunteer private 3 days later at Bunker Hill. Only 30 men were captured by the British, most of them grievously wounded. 20 died while being held prisoner. The colonials also lost numerous shovels and other entrenching tools, as well as 5 of the 6 cannon they had brought to the peninsula. So then they got away with 1 of their cannons left. That's rough. Political consequences. When news of the battle spread throughout the colonies, it was reported as a colonial loss, as the ground had been taken and significant casualties were incurred. George Washington was on his way to Boston as the new commander of the Continental Army and received news of the battle while in New York City. This report included casualty figures that were somewhat inaccurate, but it gave Washington hope that his army might prevail in the conflict. The Massachusetts Committee of Safety sought to repeat that the sort of propaganda victory that was won following the battles of Lexington and Concord. So it commissioned a report of the battle to send to England. The report, however, did not reach England before Gage's official account arrived on July 20th. His report, unsurprisingly, caused friction and argument between the Tories and the Whigs, but the casualty accounts alarmed the military establishment and forced many to rethink their views on the colonial military capability. King George's attitude hardened toward the colonies, and the news may have contributed to his rejection of the Continental Congress's olive branch petition. That was one of the two they sent. The last substantive political attempt at reconciliation. Sir James Adolphus Ogington, part of the Tory majority, wrote to Lord Dartmouth of the colonies, "The sooner they are made to taste distress, the sooner will crown control over them be produced. The effusion of blood to be put to the stop to it." About a month after receiving Gage's report, the proclamation of rebellion was issued in response. This hardening of the British position also strengthened the previously weak support for independence among Americans, especially the southern colonies. So since the British reacted so shittily to this, it actually convinced more Americans to join the cause. Gage's report had more direct effect on his own career. He was dismissed from office just 3 days after his report was received, although General Howe did not replace him until October 1775. Gage read another report to the British cabinet in which he repeated earlier warnings. A large army must at length be employed to reduce these people, which would require the hiring of foreign troops. General Dearborn's published an account of the battle in Portfolio magazine. After Israel Putnam had died, Dearborn accused General Putnam of inaction, coward leadership, and failure to supply reinforcements during the battle, which subsequently sparked a major controversy among veterans and war historians. People were shocked by the rancor of the attack, and this prompted a forceful response from defenders of Putnam, including such notables as John and Abigail Adams. It prompted Putnam's sons Daniel Putnam to defend his father using letters of thanks written by George Washington and statements from Colonel John Trumbull and Judge Thomas Grosvenor of Putnam's defense. Historian Harold Murdoch wrote that Dearborn's account absconds the absurd misstatements and amazing flights of imagination. The Dearborn attack received considerable attention because at this time it was in the middle of considerable controversy himself. Of course, he had been relieved of one of his top commands in the War of 1812 to his mistakes. He had also been nominated to serve as Secretary of War by Monroe, but was rejected by the Senate. This guy was just trying to cover his ass by shitting on Putnam. All right. Commemorations, that's okay. All right, so we got through another battle. Did a Federalist paper, and we did the Battle of Bunker Hill. So now we are one more paragraph through this whole thing. All right, well, I think that's it for the night. Did all that. Going to bed. Y'all have a good one.